Welcome in, Cubs fans. I'm Mike Bolling, the on-air social host of your Chicago Cubs, and we have a great treat for you today. We all know him as the third baseman, and the rookie home run leader, and the dancer extraordinaire for our Chicago Cubs. And this offseason, we really focused on him being dad to Molly and Claire and husband to Caroline. We had a chance to spend some time with Patrick Wisdom in his hometown, so I'm pleased to introduce him right now. Patrick, how you doing?
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And I'm happy to be a Cub, and I look forward to many more W's.
Love to hear that. I know the season's coming up really soon. We'll save a little bit of that baseball talk for later, but we just watched the home episode of yours, and living in the Pacific Northwest, you talk a lot about being free in this episode, and you had a line that said, "With age comes wisdom," which I thought was pretty cheeky. So the grind that you've gone through and the work that you've put in over the last 10, 12 years, whatever you want to call it, how have you grown mentally over the last few years, and as you've arrived with the Cubs?
Yeah, I feel like I've made tremendous strides mentally, just in terms of like understanding the game, understanding myself as a person, and understanding life, and how it kind of all correlates to the game of baseball. It's been great to talk with some of the veteran guys in the clubhouse too that have been around the game a while, that have a ton of accolades to their names, and seeing how they go about their business as well, and taking bits and pieces from what they do and how they mentally approach the game. Because I feel like that was the piece that was, I would say, missing in terms of my game, is like, how can I better myself? I look at all these studs in the game and all-stars and guys I looked up to as I continued to play. And I was like, what do they do so well? That I can add to my game, because we're all different hitters, we're all different throwers, fielders, we all do it differently. But I think the common theme is, your mindset and the mental awareness and your mental game, essentially. I think we can all learn and better that, and so that's what I wanted to really attack the last couple seasons, and I feel like I've made good strides. I have my wife and my family to thank for that as well, just keeping me on the path that I've wanted to stay on, and so I tip my cap to them as well.
Yeah, it's awesome. I think, nowadays when you talk about just taking care of your mental health and making sure you're putting your mind, body, and soul first, that really stuck with me in watching the episode. And just a quick follow-up to that, what advice would you give to a young aspiring ball player now who maybe isn't necessarily sure if they want to go through the grind, or ways to kind of make those tough situations easier, as better than anyone going through the minors for quite a long time?
For sure. Yeah, it's a great question. I reflect on that pretty often, saying like, what would I tell myself 7 years ago or 8 years ago? I'm on the prospect list, all this jazz, I got all this like outside expectation that I'm trying to exceed and meet. So the advice I would give, not only to myself, my younger self, but to younger kids, would be just to stay like mentally even keel. And what I mean by that is like, enjoy the highs, don't get me wrong, celebrate all the highs, celebrate the good things in this game, but don't let the bad games, the bad at bats, the bad pitches, the bad play kind of transcend into the next pitch and the next play, next at bat, even kind of ruin your day. Because what I've learned is, at the end of the day, people are still going to respect you for who you are, not necessarily if you went 0 for 4, 4 for 4. Yeah, it's great, you hit a couple homers in the game, Wrigley's going to love you. I'm going to walk outside, people are going to be ecstatic. But it's the same way if you go 0 for 4, people are like, hey, go get them next time. You kind of have that support, which my younger self wouldn't really have like agreed with, and been like, no, people treat you differently based on how you performed, and
Right.
that's not necessarily true. So I would say keep it even keel, but celebrate the highs, and don't let those lows like sink your ship.
Yeah, I love that, man. I think that applies to more walks of life than even just baseball or sports. I feel like you can apply that to just about anything. So that's great advice, and I know that that'll resonate with a large audience for sure.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I thought was pretty interesting, and what we lack in Chicago, in hiking we make up for in skyscrapers. So I found it so cool that you got to walk around, your hometown and take those long hikes among those enormous trees. I mean, talk a little bit about, your hometown and what it means to you, and how often you get to go do those hikes.
Sure, yeah. So being, in nature, as as we showed in the episode and as I talked about it, it's so freeing and it's just calming. Whether you're at the beach or you're in the mountains or on a lake in the desert, like wherever it may be, if you can really just like be quiet, like I think it'll help you be quiet internally, just be
Mm,
aware of your surroundings, makes it easier to be aware of your internal being. And I'm not trying to get all like, spiritual and psychological, but I think it definitely plays a part in just being free and calm. As if you can have awareness, and that's social awareness, self-awareness, and just being aware of your surroundings. And being in nature, I think has helped me become more aware in terms of like you can just appreciate those tall trees and what they provide, or
mm.
the way the rain falls and the rivers. It's just cool, like the circle of life. And you just start to appreciate things. And I think along that line, having my two daughters gave me like a different perspective, and so that was I'm easier it's easier for me to see those things.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And, coming from a kid who's lived the majority of his life in the city, anytime I get to kind of get out in nature and see like your experience, it's like, wow, that's such a different experience that I have. And the fun thing is, you've found a niche that allows you to be a better player, but also be a better person, which I think is really cool. And maybe one day I'll make my way up to the Pacific Northwest and get to go on a hike or something with you. But I know you
Yeah.
mentioned your family and your daughters. We got to see Chef Molly in this episode, and she's making breakfast. First of all, I'll say there's no such thing as too much cinnamon, so
That's
that's one
fair,
thing I
yeah.
wanted to get out there. But talk a little bit about your family. I know you touched on it a little bit, but what have they meant to your career, and what's it like to have a new home now in Chicago?
Right. Yeah. So my wife has been through it since the beginning in terms of my professional career. She was my girlfriend, and then I proposed, and now she's my wife. And so to have her along the way, along this journey, has been such a big help. I don't think I could do it without her, honestly. And now with the two girls, and she's being, a stay-at-home mom, was, a round-the-clock job. And so kudos to her for manning the household, allowing me to go to the field like stress free in a way, because what like as people we all deal with things at home in our home life, and so
Mm-hmm.
to kind of have that like that freedom to go to the field and knowing that she's got it like unlocked, she's the champion, she's the mother
Mm-hmm.
to our children, that I'm so grateful for. It's nice to go to the field kind of with that peace of mind. And having my two daughters has just been such a cool experience. I love being a dad. It's one of the coolest things I've ever been named as a dad. I think that's so
Mm.
cool. And then just my family, my parents and my brother have always been there, obviously since day one, since I picked up a ball and a bat from the get-go. So they're always a good sounding board and a good set of eyes, to know like if I'm not being myself out there, they're definitely a good reminder to just to continue to be myself. And I'm just so thankful for my support group that I honestly couldn't do it without them, because sometimes the lows are super low, like I said, but they're so good at like keeping me above water, in terms. And so celebrating the success with them has just been a cherry on top.
I love to hear that, man. And it's really cool, like getting to see where you're from and now living in the city, being a Chicago Cub. Like, take us through what that feels like. There's been much made about, you coming up and staying up, and, now you're solidified here in Chicago as, one of our marquee players. Like, what's it like to just be a guy here in Chicago and playing for the Cubs?
Yeah, a couple terms come to mind. I would say it's a whirlwind. I'm not used to kind of this this notoriety and this spotlight, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So I take it by the seat of my pants. I love interacting with the fans. I love doing these kind of things because I haven't done it before, and so it's also new to me, and it's such a cool experience, and I'm so grateful for it that I just kind of want to shine light on, who I am as a person, get the fan base to know me, because I love playing at Wrigley. I love playing in front of these fans. It's just so much fun. I'm so glad that the fans have welcomed me like they have, because it's just been a great experience, and I'm just super thankful for it all.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you very straight up, when you came up and just started mashing homers, I was in my group chat with my buddies, like, yeah, this guy's here to stay for sure. So
Thank
we're we're
you.
we're all very happy to have you, over at third base and contributing wherever. I think that it's a testament to the hard work that you've put in throughout the years, and it's really just, I'll listen to anyone talk about how great Cubs fans are all the time. So
Thank you
we are
so
the
much.
best
Yeah, and
fans.
like it may sound cliche, but it's not a cliche. And I'm sure my teammates will say the same thing. As soon as you step out there, like you just feel the love from the fans, and even like say we're struggling as a team, like you can feel the support, and you can still feel that belief that the fans have, and so that's very comforting from a player standpoint.
Absolutely. And I don't want to talk too much baseball, so I'll jump back. But I saw that you have a hobby in winemaking, which is very interesting. And I think that it's pretty cool to have, the way that you've taken your off the field life and brought it to the forefront in this episode. That was very interesting. And talk a little bit about the winemaking process and how you got into it.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, I'm still super new to it. I'm in the enology program at Washington State, which is the study of winemaking. So I'm getting my certificate in that. Getting it, learning, from the books and from the class side, but I also volunteer at Succession Wines in Washington. And really, they are the ones who kind of lit the flame. Like I've always had that spark on that interest, in terms of like when we go wine tasting,
Mhm.
the process and the art behind it, like how you can see it on the in the vines in the vineyard, but then like what happens, from that point till it's in my glass, I found just super intriguing. And so one day we were at Succession with some friends, and I just sparked up a conversation. And he was the guy there, Brock, the head winemaker, said, "Hey, anytime you want to come out and learn more, here's my number. Shoot me a text, and you can come
Wow.
on out." I was like, "Okay." And like in passing, I'm like, "Okay, that's great. Thank you very much." And then my wife was the one that said, "Hey, are you gonna text Brock? You can text him back." You can text him. Like she was on me for like 2 weeks. I was like, "Yeah, maybe." Like I don't know. Who knows? And then she's like, "Would you just call him?" I was like, "Okay." So I called him, and he said, "Yeah, finally you gave me a ring. I was waiting for you." And so I went out there for like 2 weeks the first time and just learned so much, and just really got to see the back end experience on, going from the vine to the glass. And I thought, this is so like applicable to life, to baseball, and it's a process. You're not in a rush to get such a result. And so I just kind of fell in love with that. And we're still going, and we're still learning.
So is there plans to one day have a Patrick Wisdom bottle that may be in stores in Chicago? Because I could use one on my shelf.
For sure. Yeah, I would love that. I would love to eventually have my own winery, make my own wine, not just as a hobby, but more as like a business
Mm.
standpoint. But I want to learn the right way. I want to do it the right way. And so I have great mentors, and I've met some tremendous people in the wine industry. That's the cool thing about the wine industry too. Everyone's there to help one another, and so I found that super cool as well. And I look forward to hopefully making a good bottle, and I'll definitely send you one. And hopefully we can get in some supermarkets or wine shops and liquor stores in Chicago. That'd be great.
Well, I think I'd be remiss if I don't ask you what your favorite wine is. I feel like somebody, if they were listening to this and there was a live
Yeah.
audience, somebody would want to know. So feel free, let us
Yeah,
know what
good
you drink.
question. That's a really good question. So I'm still refining my palate. Don't like I'm no sommelier. I'm no nothing like that. But we all have like our interests in what we like to drink, right? So for me, I've always been drawn to Zinfandels. Yeah, I know it's unique, but I've always just drawn that like the fruity, but yet like the peppery notes. It's just something I like. You can't go wrong with a good cab. Don't get me wrong; those are tremendous as well. And I also like Pinots. If you want something light, fresh, crisp, that's my go-to. Especially being in the Northwest, you have the Oregon Pinots and some Pinots that are from Washington. So it's been good. I love trying new things too. That's one of my like interests as well. Trying new wines, learning. At our wedding, my wife and I, we got to have some really cool wine that her dad had bought in France during her birth year. So we had some
Wow.
1990 wines at our wedding, which were exceptional. They were tremendous. They were a huge hit for our wedding party. So we're gonna do that for our kids now, and we look forward to creating a good wine for their wedding.
Love that process tradition.
Yeah,
You're rock solid, dude. That's really really cool. And yeah, I mean, I don't have much of a wine palate, but maybe I'll get to learn from you one day. So sounds like a lot of fun. Okay, so you mentioned at the very end, this line stuck with me. The top is worth the journey. And after hearing you say that and seeing that final shot, that shout out to Cubs Productions. I thought they did a great job.
yeah, super cool.
Um, Now that you've broken in, you're a Cub. What do you feel like might be next for you? Like, do you have any goals or things that you're looking to accomplish in the next few years as a Chicago Cub?
Yeah, I think it's establishing myself each year, showing and proving that I can play for this team, help this team win, because that's super important as well, right? We all want to win. The
Mhm.
organization wants to win. The fans want us to win. And ultimately the city wants us to win. And us players, I mean, that's our goal, right? Is to win every single ball game and be world champions. So it's solidifying myself each day, taking it day by day and pitch by pitch, like I've said earlier, is learning. If you can do that, then the season it doesn't seem so daunting. It's like
Mhm.
I treat each day as a season, and so how can I be my best version of myself in terms of a player and a person. I saw one thing that a fellow Chicago, but he's on the other side, White Sox player,
Mhm.
Tim Anderson, was saying. I just ran across it the other day, and he was saying that like he's made it, right. He got to the big leagues, and that's what he wanted. But now like he's trying to get even better and
Right.
figure out ways that he can learn and still get better, because ultimately that's what we need to do as players. Because I feel like once you stop learning, once you stop developing, then I think your time in this game is really short lived. And I really thought that was a cool thing to say. So it just really hit home, and I was like, yeah, that's what I'm trying to do: get better every single day.
Yeah, man, I really do think that that's something that, maybe even just young guys could really benefit hearing. The game I feel like constantly is changing. And when I was in college, the launch angle thing wasn't necessarily such a big deal. So bunting and running like I did was super cool and in. And
Yeah.
now you have to just kind of adjust. And the game has changed. There's plenty of rule changes and little tweaks and things like that. A lot was made about the time off this off season, but
Uh-huh.
what are some things that you did baseball wise to keep yourself in shape during that time?
Yeah, so I worked hard at my house. I have a gym at home that I'm able to get some really good work in. And then in terms of hitting, I hit in a cage in Seattle as well. Well, it's in Kirkland, Washington, not Seattle technically, but I've been there for a couple years um, with the guy Kurt, and we get really good work in. It's nice to have some feedback from the Cubs in terms of what they wanted me to work on.
Mm-hmm.
So we're able to address that. And then there's some other pro guys up there that we're able to get together, get outside when it's nice in the winter,
Mm-hmm.
throw the ball around, take BP, kind of all that stuff. And so, and then during that lockout, the extended period, we were able to get some live pitching, some pitchers that were up there that were ready to go. We just got a cage, and we were facing the pitchers. So that was good in terms of getting, that competitive juices flowing. And then I was down here in Arizona for a little bit before they struck a deal. And like I said, able to get some live at bats as well and get those competitive juices going, because ultimately that's kind of the key component I think that's missing in the off season, is that live reads, those live at bats that are meaningful. And so, being able to get back to spring training and into the season, that's what I'm looking forward to.
I mean, it gives me chills to think about it. As a fan, I was a little worried, but I'm glad that we are where we are. And it's really cool to hear you kind of talk through that part of your off season and the competitive juices, get the heart rate up, and really excited to see when you guys get back here in Chicago. And, opening day is only a few weeks away now. So that's super exciting.
Yeah, it's coming quick.
Very quick. I mean, April 7th couldn't get here any faster.
I know you're telling me. Yeah, I'm excited. And I'm sure the fans are just as excited, but us as the Cubs, we're super stoked for it.
Speaking of Cubs, I mean, last year I mentioned it off the top, dancer extraordinaire. Twitter was on fire. Cubs Twitter was on fire with your dance moves. And we know like our new pitcher, Marcus Stroman, has some moves too. So 2 parts here. What's the camaraderie been like? I know obviously everyone was really, pent up and ready to go, and it's been early in camp, but tell us a little bit about the camaraderie around the Cubs this camp. And then can we expect to see some more dance moves on Clark and Addison this year?
Yeah. So I'll hit your team question first. The camaraderie is great. I think we have a really good group of guys in the clubhouse in terms of their character. Jay Hay does a really good job of leading the way, setting a good example of what it's like to be a pro, what it's like to be a Cub. So we all fall in line in terms of those kind of things. And he's a good guy. Like if you have a question about, what you should wear, how we do things, he's such a go-to guy because he'll give you a straight up answer and will teach you along the way. So I have so much respect for him in terms of how he goes about his business and what he does from a leadership standpoint. And then, the additions like Stroman and Miley, I mean, I can go down the list of all additions, and so I think each guy is an asset in their own way. And I think they're going to excel with this team because, like I said, that clubhouse is just a group of really tremendous character built guys. And I think that'll, progress onto the field. And so your second question, dance moves. Yeah, like if there's a good beat on the speakers, you will catch me dancing and vibing and moving. It might be subtle, but I think I learned that from my mom. She always has, music playing as a kid, like on the weekends, just blaring out, windows open, so just learning how to move and find some rhythm. So like I said, if there's a good beat on there, you'll catch me moving, even if it's subtle.
Can't wait, man. That was one of my favorite moments of last year. It's just like middle of summer, it's hot out, you're getting your work in, you're grooving. I think all those things are super important when you're talking about playing 162 game season and, really just staying loose. And, I really have a lot of hopes that this team obviously will kind of jump on your back and maybe we'll have dancing back in the bullpen. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, right? Is you got to have fun with your work. Obviously, there's a time to be serious and, intent driven, but I think you can also do it in a way where you're having fun, right? It's a game. We got to have fun, and in life, you got to have fun too and smile through it all.
Yep. That sounds great, man. I know you have a lot of stuff going on and you have your family with you, but I was told to ask you one last question.
You got it.
Which store do you prefer best, Costco or Home Depot?
Oh, man. Okay, I'm going to say Costco because they have everything. Like if there's one place in the world that, like they said, you have free reign to go shop anywhere, it's 100% Costco. Like they have everything you ever need. But I could spend the most time at Home Depot going up and down the aisles looking at everything. I did go to Home Depot right before my flight to spring training, so there's that. But Costco is my go-to, yeah.
I honestly have spent hours in Costco. I haven't spent as many in Home Depot. Maybe I'll pick that up. But Costco is a place, like you said, you can get just about everything. And
yeah,
I'm one that likes to look and find something new. So it sounds like we got something in common there.
Oh yeah, 100%. And then now that the free samples are back, it's a huge perk.
Order has been restored in the world. Well, thank you so much for your time. Like I said, I know you're really busy and I know you have your family with you preparing for the start of this season, but really enjoyed getting a window in, an extra window in to you as a person. And good luck this season. And yeah, we'll hopefully catch up soon.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. I truly appreciate this, and I hope you guys all enjoyed.
Thank you, man.